Yes, indeed. It's time for the big question, in which we tackle a major news story of the day. And with a party conference in Birmingham and a well-received prime ministerial address failing to end the Tory civil war, can Liz Truss recover from her current position? With rumours that former cabinet ministers and colleagues are plotting her downfall in just a matter of months amid party divisions and disastrous poll ratings, tonight's big question is a simple one. Will Liz Truss be out by Christmas or shortly thereafter? What hope has she now of still being the leader of the Tories at the next election? To debate this, I'm delighted to welcome former government minister, ex-Tory MP and best-selling author Anne Widdecombe, and Brendan Chilton, political commentator, CEO of the Independent Business Network, and former head of Labour Leave, a left-leaning pro-Brexit think tank. Anne Widdecombe, you know about the machinations of the Tory party. How long has Liz Truss got?
Oh, I think she'll survive to the next general election, just because, when it comes down to it, even, the most rebellious backbenchers at the moment must recognise that if they go in for yet another leadership election between now and the general election, that really will be it. I mean, the public is already fed up, but it would be fed up to the back teeth if we then go into another period of stagnation while the Tories sort out who they want to lead them. The big problem, and you identified this in your introduction, and then you let that panel get away with talking about Liz Truss, but the real problem is not Liz Truss, it is the Conservative Parliamentary Party. And what's got to happen now is that every single constituency association has got to call its Conservative MP before them and say to them, if you want to even fight the next election as our Member of Parliament, you have got to start supporting the government now, because if you don't, we have lost. And that now has to be done because the whip's office is not imposing discipline. The associations will now have to.
Why are these Conservative MPs indulging in this political soap opera, Anne? They're not stupid people. Surely they understand that division is not something that the electorate will tolerate in a political party.
Well, some of them understand that. I mean, Michael Gove, for example, understands that. And yet he's going ahead with this. But there are plenty on the backbenches who are inexperienced, who are prone to panic, who believe that the answer to every problem is to change your leader like you change your socks. And they are the people who now need pulling up. And as I say, if the parliamentary party can't impose discipline, and clearly it can't, then the associations, the party in the country has got to do it. And they actually can. They've got the ultimate power as to whether somebody stands again. I'd have Michael Gove in. Never mind that he's senior. Never mind that, he's got a long history of parliamentary service. If his contribution to the Conservative Party is going to be a massive defeat at the next general election, then he needs to be told now, drop this or go.
However, Anne, can I just pick you up on that idea that Liz is more or less safe until the next election? Because isn't the root of all of this division the idea, perhaps the dream, that Rishi Sunak can be installed as an emergency leader, perhaps in the spring of next year? If these poll ratings remain as low as they currently are, do you not still think it's in the gift of backbenchers to pull that trigger?
Oh, it's certainly within the power of backbenchers. I wouldn't call it a gift, but it's certainly within the power of backbenchers to pull that trigger. There's no doubt about that. The question is, have they really got the lemming instinct to such an extent they really want to run off the cliff, that they want to depose yet another leader? And I think sense can be talked into them. Rishi Sunak offers only more of what was happening before, and that, in case anybody's forgotten, was not exactly successful. People have forgotten that now. They're so mesmerised by the current situation that they're not looking back to what it was like, and they're not looking forward to what it will be like.
Brendan Chilton, you've been observing British politics for a long, long time across the political spectrum and as a Labour supporter. How long do you think Liz Truss has got?
Well, if I could peer that far into the future, I'd be a very wealthy man. I could make some good money on the betting markets. I think I agree with Anne, actually. I think Liz Truss will lead the Conservatives into the next election, purely because if you look at the polls right now, the Conservatives, it's roughly somewhere between 15 and 25% behind Labour. If you're a Conservative MP, you know what the situation is at the moment. If you go to the electorate, you're likely to lose your seat. If you change horses in the middle of the race and pick another unknown, you're almost certainly even more likely to go down to a defeat. And so I think Tory MPs, despite the difficulties, will stick with Liz Truss for the time being. I think the question Liz Truss has got to deal with is how does she, as a Conservative Prime Minister, who, let's remember, didn't get the support of the majority of the incumbent MPs. This is a very interesting position whereby the current Tory Prime Minister doesn't actually have the support of most of her MPs. How does she rally them? How does she unite them? And how does she get them behind her agenda?
Well, indeed. Do you anticipate, Brendan, a ceasefire on the Tory backbenches at some point when those people, the Sunak supporters who aren't willing to bury the hatchet, when they finally accept that they're not going to get their man, do you think that the Conservatives will get together? Because they do have a great survival instinct, don't they?
They do indeed. And although Labour are currently enjoying 20 to 30 point poll leads, I do think they're slightly exaggerated. At the moment, if there was a general election, I think we'd be in hung parliament territory, but with Labour as the largest party. I think it's when you get closer to an election, it does focus minds. A lot of Tory MPs might be discontent at the moment. There's a lot of people that wish they were in the cabinet or were government ministers who weren't offered jobs when Liz Truss took over. And so they're going to be a bit disgruntled at the moment. They're going to be making a few noises. But we've got national elections next year across England and Wales, local elections in May. They will be, I think, be a significant point in the calendar between now and the next election. I do imagine they'll be pretty difficult for the Tories. I don't think Liz Truss is at the point yet where she'll be turfed out. I think she's, if I can put it into recent history, I think she's a bit like Gordon Brown in her first year. People are a little bit worried. They're not quite sure if she's up to it, but there are difficult challenges facing the country. And so the feeling is they should get behind her at least for the next year to see how she gets on.
Well, Brendan, I just wonder whether Labour should underestimate this woman at their peril. She's only been in the job for a few weeks. In my opinion, the mini budget was a failure of communication, not of policy. She's absolutely on top of her brief as Prime Minister. She's a detail person. She's a policy wonk. She's massively experienced, the most experienced member of the cabinet before she became PM. She's down to earth. She went to comprehensive. She is willing to admit a mistake. I just wonder whether she's profoundly undervalued and that Labour and her critics on the right could be in for a nasty surprise in a couple of years' time.
It's entirely possible, Mark. I mean, you know, anything can happen in British politics at the moment. If you look back over the last 5 years and said this is what happened, you wouldn't believe half of it, would you?
Yeah.
I think the problem is, on paper, Liz Truss is what you would probably have as the perfect Prime Minister. Extensive cabinet experience, very intelligent, a life before politics as well, worked her way up through the Conservative Party. The problem comes down to that first point you made, which is communication. With the best will in the world, and I think your panellists and Anne will agree with me, she's not the best communicator. You know, she had a reasonable conference speech, but she's not got the Boris factor or the Cameron factor or the Blair factor. Or
Brendan,
the
maybe
factor.
that could be her selling point. I quite like how plain and ordinary her delivery is. We had the sort of permatanned smoothie in Tony Blair. We have the sort of theatrical impresario in Boris Johnson. I quite like having an ordinary public speaker with an extraordinary talent, which I think is what Liz Truss could be.
It's possible, but I think given the challenges at the moment facing the country, from the energy crisis, the mortgage crisis, housing, the war in Ukraine, there are so many things that wake up every day. You read the newspapers, you know, it's enough to make you a manic depressive. You want someone that, at the moment, I think, that's going to lift you up a bit and give you a bit of hope that actually things are going to be a bit better. Now, at the moment, you know, Liz Truss, as you say, she's an intelligent woman. She's got a plan for the economy. But I think that lack of sort of approachability, the human element, the communication element is going to be a weight round her neck. If she can sort that out, she's got advisors round her, she could potentially go on to be a great prime minister. But at the moment, I think her days are numbered, and those numbers are the next 2 years. I think when we have that general election, the majority's gone.
One more for Brendan, then one for Anne, because on my watch, Anne will always have the last word. But Brendan, can I just ask you about Labour? Another source of peril for Keir Starmer is that he's got 2 years now, most likely, in which the public will be looking at him very closely, because now Prime Minister Keir Starmer is a realistic prospect. So Labour will be scrutinised, and they'll be under the spotlight and the microscope. So being ahead in the polls for 2 years brings with it its own challenges.
No, you're absolutely right, Mark. And I think Labour need to be much more explicit about how they will grow the economy. At the conference Labour just had, there were lots of grand targets, things like 70% home ownership, growth back in the economy, etc. Well, that's all very well and good. We need, as a party, to now spell out the how. It's all very well having this ambition of lots of people owning homes. Well, as some of your panellists identified earlier, there are huge barriers to expanding the number of homes being built in this country. Growth as well. If you're not in favour of tax cuts, you're in favour of more sort of infrastructure spending, incentives on manufacturing, etc. We need to lay that out to explain how we're going to grow the economy and make people more prosperous.
And I just suspect that Liz Truss is being underestimated here. And what she's got to do is stick with her vision, hold her ground and her nerve, and just get down to the job of work. She's got 2 years to prove herself, Anne, and she can.
Well, I would have agreed with that, except for the fact that, in the first 5 minutes, what does she do? A massive U-turn. Now, ask yourself this question. Supposing she'd stuck to the policies, supposing she'd stuck to the 40p level of income tax and just kept on explaining why and kept on pointing out that that was the norm during the Labour government, if she'd just stuck with it, what would be happening now? And the answer is exactly the same as is happening now. Things would have calmed down, we would have been moving on. But she didn't do that. She gave her enemies a massive stick to beat her with, and what's worse, the media have scented blood, because having spent days saying we're not for turning, it's a crucial policy, we're going to stick with it, she suddenly says, puts her hands in the air and says, actually, we are going to abandon it. Now, that is the biggest piece of damage that she has done herself, far bigger than her party has actually done to her. And I'm afraid if Liz Truss is to do the things that you want her to do, and I want her to do, but if she is to do that, she's got, I'm sorry to say this, but she's got to get some nerve. She's got to hold her nerve. Imagine how Churchill would have felt after Dunkirk. It doesn't always go smoothly, for heaven's sake. Keep the nerve.
I couldn't agree more. Amen to that. A thrill to have both of you on the show. Really fascinating conversation. Former Conservative Minister, ex-Tory MP Anne Widdecombe, of course she's a best-selling author as well, and reality star, and former boss and head of Labour Leave entrepreneur and councillor with the Labour Party, Brendan Chilton. Thank you to both of you for an absorbing debate. Well, I've been asking you what you think. Will Liz Truss be out by Christmas? 28.2% say yes. She's done and dusted. She's got stuffed. But 71.8% are keeping the faith and say no, she will stay in office past Christmas.